Welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. If you enjoy our content, please like or subscribe.
Hi, welcome to Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you got things you want to get done around the house? Maybe a special project? Check out K&H Construction. The local guy from Waxahachie, Chris Helms, he'll take care of you. Let him know DV LeBron sent you. So every year, I like to cover the budgets of the local school districts. They have a big effect on how your kids learn. It has a big effect. It could have an effect on your wallet. There's a lot of things that go along with the budget when it comes to budgets and the schools in Texas. Locally, it's very connected to your everyday life. Because, I mean, what's more important than your children? So I'm very grateful every year that I'm able to get, the superintendent and, in this case, the CFO on the show to talk about it. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Yes. Thank you for having us.
Yep, doing well. Thanks, DV, for having us back.
I appreciate this relationship to be able to get this stuff out about what's going on with the schools, and because I like to get it out. But I'd like to kind of cover last year because we just finished up this school year, and there's a lot of good things that I'm sure that happened at WISD. If you kind of want to go through it, Superintendent McCutcheon.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And also just want to say we appreciate you letting us be on your show, because it does allow us to get the information out and understand, we share it all in board meetings and in different times, but that's always hard to make concise and make sure that people can get the information. So we appreciate it. But yeah, so we just finished up the 25-26 school year at Waxahachie. And of course, that was my first year with the district. So a lot of great things happened. I've learned so much about the district and about the people, and been able to meet so many great people that support our district, that are outside, but then all the great folks that work in our district too, that do everything they can to support our kids. So it was a great year. Of course, I would start with just the academic pieces and how much improvement we're seeing at a lot of our campuses. A lot of great focus has been placed on that. Everything from our elementaries all the way to Waxatchie High School. So along that, we had students that were really successful. For example, our broadcast journalism team that was very successful at the state level. Our one act play, who state runner up. I mean, that's amazing. Our band, who was at state competition. And, so many other events, but of course, everybody seems to hear about the athletic pieces and how successful almost all of our athletic teams were. And, our kids work hard, and they have great people, great adults that are there to support them while they're working hard. And so I guess just throughout the year, I was just blessed to be part of all of that. It's been really great.
It is your first year, and congratulations on getting through the first year. I can't imagine being a superintendent, trying to run all the pieces that happen at a school and trying to keep that, all afloat, and all the challenges that come, that it's on you. You're the one. And I couldn't imagine that kind of responsibility. So as far as academics are concerned, what are some of the things that you learned this year, being here in this year, that you learned might be a concern going forward, and that you had to kind of address and adjust for?
I think one of the things that we're constantly trying to address is keeping up with the changes that the state puts in place for us on accountability. I'll give you an example of one, which is for our CCMR, College Career Military Readiness component, that is a large piece of the high school's academic rating. And they seem to the state changes what counts for our students for their CCMR indicator. And that rating actually is a year behind. So the rating that the graduating class that will be included in our ratings that will be coming out in August or September are actually from the 24-25 school year. So it's always a year behind. The students that just graduated, 25-26, they will count next summer. And so there's a lot that goes into that. And, the way that is set up right now is if a student meets the criteria the state has in place, they get a point. So they get their CCMR point. And what we just learned about now is that next year, the state's changing that, and it's going to be based off of a third of a point. So they're making it even harder for these students to achieve their CCMR. They have to do basically 3 things that the state lays out as opposed to 1. That also then makes it harder for the district and the high school to really get a high rating there, because there's a whole lot that goes into it. They earn their CCMR in different ways. They have 9 dual credit hours, or they are considered college ready in reading and math for various things, or they get their industry-based certification, or they've taken different courses, dual credit wise. And so it's pretty difficult. There's a lot that these kids have to do. That's one of the things. Some other things as well is just, making sure that our students are growing academically at all levels, because a big part of our academic accountability rating is not only how they performed on STAR that day, but did they make growth from the previous year? And that really is a good indicator of just really how well they're going to do anyway on their state assessment. But that growth piece is huge. That's just one of the things that we're trying to keep up with. And so
how could that reflect? Excuse me, I'm sorry. How could that reflect when those ratings come out? Tell me, how could that, with all these changes, what kind of reflection will that have, or can it have in a school that could be in a negative factor, in a negative way, when you've seen that things are different? Can you talk about the differences? Because some of the parents, they'll see the headline, they'll see this is this, and can you kind of talk about that in a sense that parents could understand how these changes can make those things look worse than they are?
Well, in terms of worse than they are, that's a little hard. I guess one of the things that we can do for parents, though, is just to be very honest and open with them about what the expectation is. Because, of course, we would want every one of our high school kids to graduate with that career, college, military readiness component. But if we wait and don't have those conversations in their freshman year, it makes it a little bit harder. And so I think just sharing that type of information with parents is crucial. One of the things also that we're waiting on right now is our our 5th and 8th grade science scores on our STAR, our state assessment. And the state has not even released those yet, because they're still working on what score would actually be considered passing. Essentially, there's levels. You did not meet grade level, or you approached grade level, which in the eyes of the state, that's passing, or you met grade level or mastered grade level. And the state still hasn't released that, because they're trying to go through all the scores that they have to determine where those cut points are going to be. That's what makes it really difficult for a school district, because you don't know what you're aiming for at times.
Superintendent McCutcheon, that there's been, and we talked about this before, there was the big learning loss of COVID. And I know we're years out now, but there were still some issues with that. There were headlines on it. Talk to me about some of the things that you saw and that the district did to try to, remedy that, or did it even affect our district?
Of course, that was in 2020, 2021, right? So to say it affected the district then, and I wasn't here, but I do know that the research shows that it affected schools at that grade level, at those younger grade levels specifically. When you think about before 3rd grade, you're learning to read. Before 2nd grade, you're learning to read. And then after, 2nd, 3rd grade, you're reading to learn. And so in those critical years, those younger grade levels that were not in the classrooms, we were trying to do that virtually. Parents were doing their best job they could at home too. Parents were asked to do a whole lot of extra. It was just hard. And so, are we still seeing some areas? Sure. Those kids have, they're getting older now. They're, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. And so I don't know that we specifically call it, that COVID slide anymore, but it's still just working to make sure our students are growing from one year to the next. And that's what we're focusing on more.
One of the things that are near and dear to my heart, and we've talked about this, is special education. What did you see overall with that this year? What are some of the things that you'd like to improve on next year, or that you improved this year?
Sure. I'll tell you, special education has gotten so hard. And even from my days when I was a special education director, it's changed. And the piece probably that we struggle with the most is making sure that we have certified teachers in those classrooms, in the areas where our behavior units or the more severe life skills units, those types of classrooms where it is very hard for teachers. They get burned out. And we even have great teachers who have taught those classes for a couple of years, and then they just want to change. And so we, in the past, or this past year, we did have to enter into quite a few contracts with companies to provide staff for those classrooms. And that really has been a focus this year, is really trying really hard to hire as many certified special ed teachers as we could, really making a push for that, so that we wouldn't have to enter into contracts with an independent contractor to come in and teach our classes. I think that's been big. We have a lot of great people in special education that do work hard. They do everything they could. You have to have a heart for kids, in those areas, because it is so hard. And we do have great staff there, but we seem to always need more. The numbers continue to rise.
Tell me, overall, did you have a staffing issue this year? Not just special education, but just in general with the teachers?
No, not so much with not really. It was really mainly just in those really hard to fill special ed areas. Other than that, maybe an opening here, there. And
Hey, we've been pretty fortunate
Yeah.
to be mostly staffed throughout the entire school year. We have run into some challenges as it relates to, as Ms. McCutcheon was saying, some of those harder to fill positions. But we know we're not alone in that. We know that there are a bunch of other districts in the state in the exact same boat.
Now that you have your year through, what have you set the culture? What kind of culture have you set in the last year at WISD?
gosh, I think if you would ask somebody that, I would hope that they say it's a culture of trust and of high expectations and of a team that works together to do the best we can for our students. It's all about the kids. Schools are for kids. And as adults, we have to work in those schools to serve kids. And that's really been the culture that I have tried to set. It really is a great place. I was fortunate to step into a place that already had a culture of high expectations and a place where the community supports the district and wants the school district to do well. That is huge. And it makes our job a little bit easier when we're in that type of situation.
Excellent. Well, one of the things that make all this happen is money. And that's why I like to talk about it each year, because there's so many challenges that the school district has faced, unfunded mandates, things that come down from the state to say, you got to do this, but no money for it. One of the big examples are the SROs. You're required to have SROs, and there's no money coming from the state. I think what they give you, like a little tiny amount, nothing major compared to what you have to cover. So there's a lot of different things, and that's why I like that you have Mr. Kahlden in here, because that's what he does, crunch numbers. Nobody knows school funding like that. Not that I've seen. I mean, I've been covering this for years, and I still don't quite get it. So tell me, Mr. Kahlden, what was the biggest cost driver this year that really affected the budget?
For us, our biggest cost driver is always staff. It's always personnel. So it's going to make up for us about 85% of our budget. Education is very much a people-focused, people-heavy industry. So we know that's going to be the case. And as Ms. McCutcheon was talking about a minute ago, DV, as we hit some really hard to fill positions, especially in special education, separate settings, having to go out and get contracted teachers and contracted staff to come in and fill those roles that we were unable to hire locally, that really was a significant additional burden for the district. Those contracts usually are about twice to three times as expensive as it would be to hire an individual to serve that same role. So that was one of the real big financial struggles that as a district we were met with this year. Additionally, anytime the price of oil goes up, when you're a transportation provider, you're going to, especially covering 192 square miles, you're going to see an increase in the fuel bill at the end of the day. So that one hit us a little bit too when we started seeing diesel close to $5 a gallon for our transportation fleet. Thankfully, it's starting to come back down to normal levels that we can sustain within our budget. But those are just a couple of the challenges that we faced throughout the course of the year. But, that's what we're tasked with doing, is doing the best we can with the resources that have been entrusted to us. And so we're going to do the best we can to make sure our students have what they need and that our staff are taken care of as well.
What happens when those situations come up? Do you have to go back to the board and ask for more money, supplementals, or is that a thing?
Yeah, so really good question. Sometimes we do have to go back to the board and ask for additional funds to go and do. This year, one of the big ones that we had were we changed up our student device distribution plan. And so we had to go back to the board and ask them for about $500,000 to execute a change in this plan. We think this plan is going to be much better because it's going to get a more current, more refreshed device in the hands of our students going forward, which we think will help improve their learning and their learning outcomes. But yes, sometimes we have to go back to the board and ask for those budget amendments or budget increases. But a majority of the times we can do that within our locally allocated budget. So we do, within our budget, we usually have some funds set aside for changing plans because we know, especially in a year with a new superintendent, there's probably going to be a new plan or change that we're going to need to make on the fly. And so we don't always budget 100% of all of our money. We usually leave a little bit unallocated so that we can reallocate it later to meet needs.
Yeah, and I can imagine that those needs, like we were talking about, those needs come random and you end up having to get. But let's talk about growth, because that one of the things that I've learned about the budget is that one of the biggest things that affect you is ADA, the student attendance, because that's how you kind of get your funding. That's kind of the simplest way I can put it, that you get the funding from the students coming in and being bodies. So last year, the board approved, I can't remember the exact number, but you had the projected growth was supposed to be, supposed it was going to be somewhere around 4%. And the school budgeted more like 3% more conservatively. What ended up happening this year? How did it play out with growth?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we were really surprised by growth this year. And unfortunately, it wasn't in a positive. But we anticipated about 300 to 350 additional students this year. And we held flat from where we ended the 2024-2025 school year. So we were really surprised. And a lot of those funds I was just telling you about that, we kind of held aside for changing plans. Well, a lot of those, came to cover essentially revenue shortfalls at that point. Areas in which we knew we were going to have expenditures. We had agreed to this contract. We had agreed to this expenditure already, but we just didn't have the students in seats to actually bring in that revenue. So, as you described, state revenue from students in actual, daily attendance drives about 50% of our local revenues. Then the other 50% primarily driven by property values and property taxes. So your painting of that as a significant driver of our revenue is really spot on.
Because the kids not coming in, was it a major hit? Did it cause any kind of deficit in some of the things, or it just, you guys kind of just adjusted to keep everything flat?
A little bit of everything. So we did make some adjustments on the fly as we went through the school year, but it will likely cause us to have a deficit budget or deficit expenditures at the end of the 25-26 school year. So I do anticipate our expenditures will exceed our revenues, primarily due to a decrease in revenue from lack of ADA.
What does it look like? I know the numbers are all preliminary. I don't know if you've actually presented to the board yet, but what's it kind of looking like right now?
So we have been talking about it with our board. We knew that this was going to be something significant. So we had a mid-year financial update for them in January. And then we've been talking about it through our budget workshops as we've been looking forward to the 26-27 school year and fiscal year. Right now, my best guess is it's going to be about a $2 million shortfall for us. That might be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on, right now we're in the hot part of the year. So we have air conditioners that are going down and acting squirrely, just like you might at your house, or people who are listening to this might experience at their jobs or their house as well. So depending on kind of how those play out for us, and we'll get school started here the first part of August, somewhere around the 12th. And so we'll have a really good idea of where we're going to end the year. But I'm thinking right now we'll probably be deficit to the tune of about $2 million for the 2025-2026 fiscal year.
That's going to take some creativity to make up. Definitely.
It is definitely going to take some creativity.
It's going to take some creativity. And I've seen that. Like last year, the board kind of moved money a little bit. I think the INS did something and was able to kind of keep it flat. But these $2 million, that's going to be big decisions and those are political, folks. I can't get into the political part of that unless I have one of the board members on, but, because those are decisions they make. But, the school district presents these things to them. So we're getting kind of an insight into that, into why and how. So what are the other, because insurance costs have gone through the roof for people. Are you dealing with that too? Food, while inflation isn't really growing that fast, you still have those prices haven't went down. So tell me, how has that affected the school too?
So to your point, inflation may not be hitting us right now, but it has ramped up significantly over the last couple of years without coming back down at any point. So that's kind of resetting a new normal for us. The other side for us is most of our funding, we've talked about it from an ADA standpoint, but that amount that we receive per student is determined by the legislature. So when that amount doesn't keep up with inflation and cost increases, you're right, it does put a strain on our spending and how exactly we're going to go about doing the things that we need to do. We've actually been fairly lucky in a commercial insurance market. Rates have actually stabilized and they're starting to come down a little bit on property and casualty insurance. So for us, insurance has stabilized a good bit. We do anticipate there might be a little bit of a reduction this year, depending on taxable or total insurable values that are added to our coverages. One thing that we're looking forward to next year is we're getting really close to the completion of Waxatchie Creek High School as it gets ready for its opening in about 1 year's time. So in the 27-28 school year, we'll have another comprehensive high school online to serve students. But DB, that's a 500,000 square foot building. So no matter how you slice it, there's not a lot of creativity that's going to stop that insurance coverage from being a monster. So we do know that, and we're making some plans for that as we look into the 26-27 school year and budget year, that we're about to have a significant increase in our insurance just from adding that building. We don't anticipate that building being added until April or May of 27, when it actually is closer to completed and we receive that certificate of occupancy. But we do know there's going to be a significant portion that's going to add to our bill for next year for insurance as that relates to just the completion of Waxahachie Creek. As it relates to food costs going up, but in Waxahachie ISD, our child nutrition program is its own fund. And so its revenues cover its expenditures, which is a blessing for the local taxpayer because they're not subsidizing that fund through property taxes. That fund is primarily subsidized through the payment of a meal charge for breakfast or lunch as a student goes through that line. And then, of course, there's a federal program, the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program, that can help those that are economically disadvantaged still receive those meals without necessarily having to pay the same amount out of pocket as a more economically able family might have to pay for a meal. So that fund has seen some challenges with the increase in food costs, but our child nutrition program, their leadership team is fantastic at coming up with new ideas and new menu options. And they do a really good job of reaching out to the students and getting feedback. And so they don't just offer the same things every day. They change that up and they keep with trends, what students might like. And so their food costs are really hard to pinpoint because they're usually changing, modifying those menu options and the recipes that go into those menu options all the time based off student feedback. So they do a good job of living within their means.
This is a leadership question that I have for you, Superintendent McCutcheon. So we're looking at a $2 million deficit in how we're going to go into the next year. As of right now, there's always I don't think valuations have come in yet, or, there's always something that has to happen for you guys to get the concrete numbers on the house and the taxes and stuff. But you just looking at $2 million just as of right now. The board tells you, Superintendent McCutcheon, I need a 10% cut. What does that look like? How does that affect students? How does that affect teachers? What kind of effect would it look like?
As Mr. Kahlden said, 85% of our budget is in staff. So a 10% cut. The main way that we would do that would be in staffing. It's pretty much the only way to come up with a 10% cut. But I will say that is not where we are at right now. If we were to do that, a couple of things that would probably happen is you might see a little bit bigger class sizes at their elementary levels. The state would like those to be capped through fourth grade at 22-1, except for pre-K that's 11-1. So you have a teacher and a para in those classrooms at the pre-K level, but kinder through fourth grade, 22-1. So let's say we were having to come up with a 10% cut. We would probably raise our expectation for that to be about a 24-1 ratio, maybe 25 at the most. And then we would have to ask the state for a waiver for our class sizes. Very few of our classes this year were at that 22-1 ratio. And we looked at that every week to make sure that we were not over. We did have quite a few open seats at our elementaries. And it kind of went back to what Mr. Kahlden talked about. We were expecting 350 student growth and we were essentially flat. So teachers were already hired and instead of, we couldn't fill those seats up, but some teachers were very close to that 22-1 at those grade levels. Now, fifth grade is, in the eyes of state for staffing ratios, is more in line with the secondary. So we have a cap of about 25-1. our internal caps at fifth grade and our junior highs. Now, some of those got bigger. Our high school, some of them are larger than that as well, some of those classes. But, outside of staffing, it'd be really hard to come up with a 10% cut, don't you think?
It would be, but one of our first steps that we're taking is really trying to eliminate those contracted staffing positions. Really try to get back to a in-house staff that member that we can deploy in those special education classrooms and that wants to be here, because we've seen the cost of those contracts are about twice as expensive as hiring a staff member. So we had a good number of those contracts this year, and it's really our goal and our push all spring has been to get quality staff in and not have to do those outside contracts, which would make.
Can you give me I'm sorry. Tell me, just so the people know, when it comes to that number, you said there's a significant difference. Can you give a number, contrast number? Like, let's say a special education teacher is 80,000. What does the contract look like?
Generally, that contract is going to be anywhere from 160,000 to 200,000 for that same individual. So it's usually about twice to not quite 3 times what the district expect to spend for that same staff member.
And DB, to add to that, it's our understanding the teachers, they don't really make any more than they would if they were working for us. That extra money goes to the company, the staffing company. So, obviously there's companies making some money off of schools doing that, because we get into a position where we have to hire them.
Right. And because especially with the special education, what you were saying, there's guidelines that have to be met, folks, like required by federal law, that things be met in IEPs. And if they're not met, things can get really bad. And it's detrimental to the children, it's detrimental to the school. So it ends up being where these things have to happen. So I could see why you end up having to contract people in there, because those are things that have to happen. Now, this is probably a question that Mr. Kahlden could answer. That the legislator approved additional funding that last session. How has that affected funding this year? Has that really changed anything? Has it really gotten to the school district or no?
So we did see additional funds that came from the legislature as a result of their action last year. But one thing that we as a district noticed is that when the legislature approved funds for, say, teacher pay raises, well, they left out all the other staff. And it's more than just a teacher that is touching the lives of kids on a daily basis. There's paraprofessionals on the campus who are working with those students. There are other individuals, whether it's the bus driver getting them to and from school, or the food service worker that is making the breakfast or lunch for them, the maintenance crew that is maintaining the building that makes it a safe and effective learning environment for the student and the staff members. So when we received those funds last year and we saw additional funds for teachers, we, the district, made the decision to utilize the other funding sources that were provided by the state to ensure that all the rest of our staff members received a fair and equitable increase as well. So we didn't just stop at, there was a support service increase that was about 1/10 of the increase for teachers, which generally would have worked out to say $250 for our support services staff. But as a district, we pooled some additional funds together, that additional funding from the state, to make sure that our staff received a 3 to 4% increase and not just put all that into teacher pay raises.
Did you get a chance, and I know that some superintendents I've seen, or not, some CFOs I've seen throughout all these different school districts, they'll present what different tax rates would bring different revenues and how the school would have to function. Do you break it down like that for the board? And I know they make the decision as far as the politics is concerned, but I'm talking numbers with you. Are you looking at, proposing to them or giving to them something that's a little bit more, or kind of staying flat?
I anticipate our tax rate will stay flat from where it was last year. And that a lot of that is primarily driven by some competing interest from our trustees. So our trustees do a fantastic job of telling us what they would like for the school district budget to look like for the following year. And they start pretty early. They start in February and March, kind of giving us that feedback. So this year, 2 of our big priorities from trustees, the same as they were last year. We want you to operate within a balanced budget to the best of your abilities. And we want you to try to make sure our staff are taken care of. We want you to give our staff a pay raise wherever you're able to. But within the confines of a balanced budget. And so those are our two competing priorities that we go into the 26-27 school year with. And so with that as our priorities, we don't explore a lot of lowering that tax rate any more than the state requires us through compression. It's generally not an additional function that we've been tasked with by our board. So one thing that lowering that tax rate, yes, it does a great job of helping taxpayers because that's obviously a lower tax bill, but it also takes additional funds out of the hands of educating our students as well. So that's always a competing balance that we have to look at because we are so tied to student attendance, driving half of our revenue in the general fund.
Superintendent McCutcheon, do you think that that's going to be a possibility? I know it goes down to what the board members vote on, but do you think that a pay raise for the teachers or for staff is going to be something that's possible or feasible this year?
I'll tell you, we are still investigating and trying to determine what we can do until we have our certified values for our tax base.
Trying to say
and really those certified values really drive our tax base increase, but they also do have an effect on what the tax rate is going to be that we're allowed to set. And at the end of the day, this, Mr. Kahlden said, where the state will tell us where we have to compress to. So to answer your question today, I don't know. We would love to be able to give raises, but the board has asked us to remain in a balanced budget. And I can say that I have worked in a district that did not remain in a balanced budget, and the financial longevity of the district becomes a concern when you're basically living off your savings account. And you can only do that for so long, and your savings account is gone if you're doing that on a personal level. It's the same thing for a school district on a fund balance. So I do commend the board for the fact that they want us to remain to propose a balanced budget. They want to pass a balanced budget, and they really have the expectation that we're going to remain in that. This past year was a little bit of an anomaly with our growth not being there. And so we're optimistically anticipating a little bit of growth this year, a little bit, but we are not expecting to grow the 350 students that we did last year.
The budget that you're going to propose going forward, do you think that number is going to be real conservative on growth this year?
Yes, sir, because we have to get a better handle on, was this year an anomaly, or is there some underlying factor that's causing our actual student growth to not meet demographic projections? And so I think we are going to be pretty conservative on our student growth for next year. And hopefully we are wrong. Hopefully our growth exceeds our expectations, or at least the ones that we put in the budget. And that way we will have that flexibility and freedom to go back and try to make sure that our staff are taken care of and that our students are able to learn with the resources that they need.
And Dee, I kind of want to add to that if I could. Mm-hmm. Across the state, I think the number they put out was 76,000 less students in the state of Texas this last school year. 76,000. And so I personally know superintendents, colleagues, their district shrunk by 1,000 kids in 1 year. And some of them have shrunk by, numerous thousands over the period of, 4 or 5 previous years. And so for those districts that are losing enrollment like that, it is very difficult to operate. I feel like we were actually pretty fortunate that we didn't shrink. We stayed fairly flat. I talked to some other surrounding districts here, and they were pretty much the same. They might have grown, a little bit here or there, but they overall were flat enrollment. So the other thing we know is that there's just less kids in the state. Families are having less kids. I had this conversation yesterday. It used to be where you were one of 3, or even your parents were one of 4, and now there's not that many kids. A lot of families have 2 children and less kids. We know birth rates are down. And so we couple that with the fact, though, that we are growing there in terms of housing, the housing market here. And so we're kind of being a little cautious, a little optimistic about maybe we will grow a little bit.
Well, and I'm remiss to say that, folks, WISD is not an anomaly in this situation that's happened, as the superintendent was talking about. MISD is kind of going through some of those stuff, and Fort Worth ISD had to close. There's several districts, you just got to look around, that are having these same issues where, you have a lot of houses, but the people that are buying their houses were sort of like me when I bought another house last year. My kids are grown. I just, we went to another house, and I'm closer to 50. I'm not having any more kids. That ship has sailed. So it's one of those deals where that's kind of happening and people are waiting longer. So staff being the biggest part of your budget and the biggest part of your revenue is kids coming in. You're getting ready to open this high school. How does it look like with being able to man it, and what does that bill look like to staff it? Because you're going to have to are you going to have to get all new staff for that? And is that going to be a big bill?
There will have to be some staff adds. There's obviously going to have to be, a principal and office staff that may not be fully relocatable from Waxahachie High School or even Global High School if their enrollment were to decrease as a result of Waxahachie Creek High School opening. But not all of those positions are going to have to be new and added to the district. We know that within the district, we have an expectation of, say, 3,500 high school students, and now they have a fourth option in which to go to. So as our students go, as we have students who are zoned to Waxahachie Creek, then we might have to pull some staff from Waxahachie High School, primarily the campus that those students would have attended, to move them over to Waxahachie Creek. That would be more common in the teaching realm or counseling or assistant principals. But there are going to have to be position adds. We know we're going to have to add counselors custodians for the building. We know we're going to have maintenance crew that can now address a new 500,000 square foot building. There will have to be some teacher adds. There will likely be some specialized teachers. There will have to be some additional teachers based off just class enrollment, class sizes. We know that there's going to be leadership positions. There's going to be, say, a band director, a head football coach. There's going to be some leadership positions that we're going to have to add as a result of that campus opening. Again, we're going to try to take as many of them as we can from Waxahachie High School, but we can't leave Waxahachie High School understaffed either. So there will be some position adds, and we're working through that to get ready for the fall of 2027 when that campus opens. So we'll be going through next year identifying what positions will be going from Waxahachie High and what positions will be added in the district.
It sounds like there's some very tough decisions and stuff coming up. And as I tell, the different people working in education around this county that I talk to is, I keep you guys in prayer because these are our kids that you're having to, make sure they're educated. And there's so many different drivers to that people just don't see. And this is where I try to put it in the show, so they could see some of those challenges. It's not all doom and gloom, but there's serious challenges that are ahead. And, you have one thing that I do want to talk about before I kind of close out was you had to hold back on building that elementary because of, and we talked about the last time we had you on. So what does that look like now? Is that something that's just going to stay on the back burner for now, or are we starting any more construction projects?
Yeah, really good question.
Yeah.
So Ms. McCutcheon hit on it a little bit ago. With our enrollment not exactly meeting our expectations this year, we do have about 500 open seats at the elementary level. And quite honestly, that's assuming a perfect distribution of all students across the district. So you're not going to find one campus where we've got 500 open seats. But right now with 500 open seats, there's really not an impetus to go out and build another elementary school. There's just not need for an additional 700 seat capacity at the elementary level. So right now that building is still on hold. We believe that when the day comes that we need to start looking at building that elementary, that we can find some land to build that elementary in a relatively quick time span, and we can make sure that the finishing touches on design are made in a short order so that we can build that timely. But right now there's just not a need to issue that $42 million in bonds to go out and build an elementary to essentially sit vacant.
So people understand you haven't actually, because the bond pass, people know the bond pass and that it was for these different schools. So just to explain, that debt you're not carrying that debt right now. You didn't just get whatever that bond was for. Let's say it was, I can't remember, it was 70 million, let's say. Is that what you're carrying in debt, or you issue it as you go?
Yeah, so really great question. And it's one that we try to clarify as often as we're talking to the community. So in May of 2023, we asked for the ability to issue $595 million in bonds, right? And then that fourth proposition was unsuccessful. So we got authority from the taxpayers to issue $575 million worth of bonds. we only issue the bonds as we're working on the project. So the taxpayer is not servicing any debt until that project is started and we're starting to build something. So right now we're sitting on 42 million of unissued for that 11th elementary school because we have not started on that. We're also sitting on about 30 million of unissued money for that Waxahachie Creek, that second comprehensive high school, only because we're not at the point where we think we're going to need that 30 million. So we've issued funds for Waxahachie Creek High School. We have plenty of enough issued money right now to service the bills as they come in for the construction of Waxahachie Creek. But at the end of the day, there is 30 more million that's authorized for the final project total on that project. We're just not sure if we're going to incur that yet. And if we are, we definitely don't need it right now. We might need it, say, January of 2027, but we don't need it right now. So
Is
not
that
asking
project
the taxpayer to service that debt.
Is that project on schedule, and has it overrun on cost, or are you guys under budget on that one?
That project's doing really well right now. Unfortunately, it's been very hot and very dry, which is great for construction. They're not missing any days due to bad weather. It's not so great for the local taxpayer or the local farmer, as it's a whole lot higher water bill because we're not getting the free stuff right now. But right now that project's moving along very well. It's moving on schedule. I would tell you, if it's just us, I would tell you it's running about a week or two ahead of schedule from where they originally thought it was going to be. But for the general, community, you can lose a week or two in construction real fast with a lot of bad weather. So I would tell you it's on schedule. On budget, it's still doing great on the budget. We did build in some cost escalators, not knowing exactly what inflation was going to be because this project's going to be a 30-month build. So it's really tough to know exactly what steel is going to do when you're not going to order steel for 8 more months. Now, that's a bad example because we've already ordered steel and all that, but we did build in a cost escalator on the project, and thankfully we've not had to utilize much of that cost escalator. So we're still sitting really good on the budget, and they're actually on time, a little bit ahead of schedule right now. So we're looking at about an April 2027 completion, which would give us plenty of time to get staff in there and get going for that August of 2027 school year.
What's the ballpark range of what this proposed budget is going to be as far as cost?
Total budget for the district for next year, general fund right now is sitting at about 126 million. So I would imagine we'll be at about 127, 128 million total general fund. There, again, some of that is we've overspent a little bit this year with some one-time expenditures as it relates to, say, technology and some of these contracts. But I don't foresee a large expansion in general fund expenditures, but I do anticipate we'll probably be in that 127, 128 million dollar range. From an INS standpoint, the other big component of the tax bill for taxpayers, the INS component is going to go up a little bit, not the rate, not the revenue received, but the actual debt service. So we are working to kind of reduce our general fund, or not general fund. We are working to reduce our fund balance in the INS fund a little bit. It got a little bit more than we needed. So we are intentionally bringing that down a little bit. So we're paying a little bit more on the debt service side with the same resources that we've had the last couple.
The schools always keep a reserve that some of it's required by the state. I think it's like 3 months worth of the revenue to keep it running. How does that look like this year? Is that something that you're going to have to, pull money from? So
we're right at about 24%. So if you consider 25% 3 months expenditures and fund balance, we're at about 24.1%. So we're right in that ballpark of that state expectation of having 25% of expenditures. That's one more reason we're trying to be very careful as we work through next year's budget and make sure that our spending is on point and that we're not going out there and just unnecessarily spending funds, because we would like to add a little bit more money to fund balance to get us back to that 25% so that we're meeting that minimum state expectation.
It does help you with bond ratings too, right?
Yes, sir.
When you keep debt finance, it does help you when you have to refinance and kind of get that debt service lower when rates are lower, right?
That's a very timely question, because we just had a bond review by the Fitch's rating service this past week. And that was one of their strength comments that they mentioned, was that the district is meeting that expectation of having that fund balance reserve. And that was one of their comments that they listed in maintaining our debt rating. And so the better the debt rating, the better it is on the interest rate that we pay on those bonds when they're issued. And so that's a win-win for the district and the taxpayer, because the better the debt rating, the better the interest rate's going to be, the lower the taxes need to be to maintain that.
All right, now we're going to get into some of the good stuff as we close out. Superintendent McCutcheon, what are some of the things that you need parents to know as they come into this new school year? Like we talked about, the average daily attendance is something important. You base how you're going to do, what teachers you're going to hire and how you're going to function these schools in the district by, these kids who are registering and getting in there. What are some of the things you'd like parents to know before this new school year that could help the district better accommodate?
Well, I will say, and I said it earlier, is the support from this community for our school district is amazing. And so we have great parental support as well. So I would say continued parental support in all of our areas would be greatly appreciated. Of course, attendance. We need our students to come to school. And outside of the funding, students learn when they're in classrooms. And so if we're wanting to make that academic improvement in all areas at all times, we want the kids in class. The teachers want their kids there. And so that is key. And then just also, I guess we just kind of like to let the parents know that we're excited to start the school year. We've been working hard all summer long to find the absolute best staff that we can in those areas we've had to replace. We're making a lot of progress on the construction projects at those facilities. And so, we're trying to make our facilities top notch as well. Some of our buildings are a little bit older, and so they've required a little bit more work, but a lot of construction projects going on right now. And they'll be able to see that when school starts up, and, the changes that we're making, for instance, like at Shackelford, where they used to have older lockers in their classrooms, and now they're going to have a refreshed kind of look in the classroom with a cubby instead of a kind of an old fashioned locker, those kind of things that we're trying to do to make it more appealing. But we're excited for school to start. We already have Operation First Day of School scheduled. There'll be a lot of great opportunities for our kiddos that Saturday. I believe it is August 4th.
Sounds
correct? And, our PR team is working really hard. They work with all kinds of different organizations and individuals to just set up the best start to the school year. And so excited about that. It's hard to believe it's already July, and school's going to start pretty quick. And so we're ready and anticipating a great school year. And I know you've talked a lot about it, last year being my first year here with the district, and it is, but it's kind of amazing to think of how fast time goes, because I'm actually starting my 30th year in schools. This will be my 12th year as 30. Yeah.
I don't see it. You must have started when you were 10.
Oh gosh, you're kind. You're kind. But my 12th year as a superintendent, and so people ask me all the time, what's different in the big schools? And I guess the thing is we have great people that support us. And fortunately, I've been in some smaller schools where I was the one having to do those jobs, and so I understand how hard our staff are working for our kids. And we just want our parents to know that. And I misspoke. I said August 4th. It's August 1st is our Operation First Day of School.
So as I close in the last question, what does success look like to you in this coming year? When you're finished with this coming year, what does success look like to you, Superintendent McCutcheon?
It looks to me, a success to me would be all of our students growing academically, all of our student extracurricular activities being successful, being supported, students enjoying their days at school, teachers enjoying their days at school, parents feeling like we're doing everything we can to support their kids. Parents are so important. We're fortunate to have a board of trustees that's very supportive and wants this school district to be a success. We would like our academic rating to continue to grow. I think that would be success. And I think all of the things I just talked about lend itself to that academic rating growing. The state still measures us on an A to F rating as a state, as districts and campuses. We want to keep growing. We want to get to the B, and then we want to eventually be an A. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's got to be a lot of support. And so to me, that's what success looks like.
Well, I am so grateful that you guys came on, and we covered a lot of stuff. I know I did it a little bit different this year, but I wanted to kind of flow and kind of hit the stuff that's really affecting the day-to-day so that people understand these are the challenges, this is what's presenting, and these are some of the things we got to do. Of course, now comes the political part of it where it goes to the board, and and they make the choices of how they're gonna if they're gonna implement or not. But it's good to know from the people on the ground when you're proposing what the budget looks like. So I do appreciate you guys' time. Can you stick around real quick after the show?
Sure. Thank you. And
Thank you.
we appreciate you allowing us this time to share. It really does help us get the word out.